Hello and welcome all to my Bandos guide. This guide is specifically for new or returning members who don't have much experience in Bandos. This guide will be everything you need to know to kill the boss or give you those advanced tips and trips to take your Bandos killing to the next level. But without further ado, let's get on into the requirements. First off, the minimum requirement to access the God Wars dungeon is to complete Troll Stronghold. But I'm going to recommend you go ahead and complete Edgar's Ruse. That way you're allowed the Trollheim teleport. All that this requires is level 31 Horrible in addition, which you should already have by the time you're willing to go to God Wars Dungeon. If not, go ahead get it. It only takes about 30 minutes and maybe a few 100k. Well worth the time investment to save all that time traveling to Trollheim. So, also to access the Bandos room as well as God Wars Dungeon in general, you'll need 70 strength to clear the boulder blocking God Wars Dungeon, as well as 1 rope when you go your first time to set up a rope down into the dungeon. But also, you'll need 70 strength to access the Bandos room with a hammer. Don't worry about bringing a hammer because you will most likely receive one while kill counting on goblins, but that is something we will discuss in the future. I'm going to recommend 44 agility to use for the Trollheim agility shortcut down the mountain. If you don't have it, you can still access the dungeon just fine. You'll probably take an extra 30 seconds to run around the long way. Don't worry, that's really not much of a big deal. But in the long run, I suggest getting 44 agility for the time investment and time savings. For combat requirements, I'm going to recommend that you're 90 attack, 90 strength, and 90 defense to do this efficiently. Although you can be a much lower level, I would minimum 75, but I'm going to go ahead and recommend 90 if you really want to be efficient. Let's be real. Training your combat is as easy as it's ever been. Go to Nightmare Zone, AFK for a few days, boom, you're 90. Great job. So I'm going to also recommend 70 prayer. I know this cost might be steep at a few mil for some players, but if you're willing to invest the time to get 70 prayer for piety, piety is going to send your level of Bandos killing skyrocketing high. It's going to be crazy. And I'm going to recommend 80 plus mage. For those that don't know, mage isn't just for attack, but most of your mage defense bonus is calculated based on your mage level, not your defense level. So having 80 mage is going to be a significant increase to the damage reduction that you're taking. So go ahead and get that 80 mage. It's great also for pot share. So a quick tip related to bringing a hammer. You actually don't need to bring a hammer to God Wars. You could bring your full inventory full of all supplies. The way you hammer trick is when you receive a drop of a hammer, you will then repeatedly pick up and drop the hammer to ensure that it doesn't disappear before you enter the room. Then when you go to enter the Bandos room, you will bring all of your items into the room with the hammer by dropping one of your supplies on the side that the door is not on. When you enter the door, you will then drop a few of your supplies on the door side. Then when you go back into the previous room, you will then pick up your originally dropped supply, hammer back into the room that you were trying to enter in the first place, and then drop the hammer, pick up all of your resources, and now effectively you have entered the room with all of your supplies and the hammer, and then drop the hammer. I know this might sound confusing, but I hope this video shows a good explanation of what I am trying to describe. So once you finally get into the Bandos room using a hammer and your 70 strength, all you have left to do is walk up and to your right, and you will be outside the actual door to the Bandos God Wars area, where you'll be fighting General Griador, or however the hell you pronounce his name. Okay, so now you finally know how to get to Bandos, but what the hell do you bring? Well, don't ask another question, because I'm going to answer that for you. First, I'll go over the setup for attackers, and then I will go up for the setup for the tanks. Both are very similar, but obviously your attack setup is focused on DPS, while your tank setup is more focused on dealing or taking damage. So your attack setup will start off with the helmet. It's going to be the Neznot helmet. This is one of your best in slots for prey and strength. Of course, it does not have some of the strength bonus that the Serpentine helmet has, but you don't want to be wearing the Serpentine helmet because its cost for scales is very expensive, and the poison effect that it has is actually very bad because the minions will be mostly dead before the Bandos boss is killed, which means that you won't be able to use your other gear to heal on the minions. So I recommend bringing the Nezi home. Next is the Torture. Everyone knows this is the best in slot when it comes to attack setup, so go ahead and wear the Torture. If you can't afford it, an alternate setup will be using the Fury. For your body, you go ahead and bring the Carol's Top. This is your best in slot for mage defense. Of course, you don't want to be bringing the Armadillo chestplate because it has negative attack bonus. But if you cannot afford the Carol's Top, a good alternate would be the Black Dragonhide Top. And if you also can afford it, maybe the Zamorak top. It looks pretty badass and it does count as a Zammy item, but again, the Carol's top is better. You don't want to be bringing a Bandos chestplate for a Bandos attack because you're mainly going to be tanking the mage minion. You'll be praying range during the boss fight, so you want your magic defense bonus to be up a little bit too. So sacrificing the +2 strength bonus is worth it. Definitely have the extra mage bonus of the Carol's top defense. For your legs, you're going to want to bring Bandos tasets. It's the best in slot if you have them. I know they're kind of expensive. They do count as a Bandos item, so that is a plus, but if you can't afford the tasets, go ahead, bring Guthin's chain skirt, because you're going to be using that in your inventory anyway. It'll save you a spot, or maybe even the Varrock skirt if you want a little bit more extra range defense and prayer or something, but really just bring the tasets. For your boots, you're going to want to go ahead bring the primordial boots, best in slot for attack. Everyone knows it. If you can't afford primordial boots, go ahead bring dragon boots, or maybe even climbing boots, but really like dragon boots minimum. That's what you should be shooting for. Of course, for your cape, you're going to be wanting to bring the Inferno cape if you have it, but if you're a noob like me, you don't got one yet, go ahead bring Fire cape. And if you're not good enough to go get a Fire cape, go ahead, go watch my guide on how to get a Fire cape. Really super easy, but bring a skill cape. And if you can't afford a skill cape, go ahead, bring that Obsidian cape. You're going to need that defense bonus, because if you're bringing an Obsidian cape, you're going to get banged. Anyway, let's go on. Since you're not ranging, this is a melee guide. For your Unholy Blessing, you're going to want to use that in your arrow spot, your quiver spot. It gives you +1 prayer bonus, which is big in this. In addition to that, the Unholy Blessing counts as a Zamorak item. So you're going to want to make sure you at least have the Zamorak and a Bandos item. So easy Zamorak item is Unholy Blessing. The Bandos item, I'm recommending you bring Tasets. If you can't bring one of those items, you're going to need to find somehow to bring a Bandos item in the Bandos God Wars. And also, what you can do is also bring one of the Book of War prayer books and then drop it, because since it's untradeable, you could go pick it up for free at the lighthouse. That also does count as a Bandos item. So moving on to your attack weapon, the best in slot is the Grazi Rapier. If you cannot afford that 160 mil or whatever it is currently, you could go ahead and get a Tentacle Whip. The Tentacle Whip does cost about 200 GP or 250 GP depending on how much whips are worth. It is a 1/10,000th of a whip cost. You will have 10,000 charges on the Tentacle Whip, but the advantages and DPS that it offers over the regular whip is definitely well worth it when bringing the Bandos God Wars. But if for some reason you really can't afford that, you can go ahead and bring a regular whip, but people may make fun of you for being a noob. So for your shield spot, trick question, you're not actually bringing a shield, you're bringing the Avernic Defender if you could afford it. I know that's kind of steep at 80 mil, but it's definitely worth the bonuses over the Dragon Defender. If you can't afford it, go ahead, bring in the Dragon Defender. It's also a pretty good alternative. And you don't want to be bringing a shield because you're not going to be taking too much damage from the mage or from the melee range or mage minions. So you want to be focusing on DPS, that way you can help out your tank. That's the theory here. For your gloves, obviously Bandos gloves, but in some case, if you're like my partner here, Cardelio64, who's a big noob, he hasn't done any of the recipe for Disaster Subquests yet, RIP, so he needs to bring the regen bracelet. But actually, fun fact, he doesn't know what the regen bracelet is as of the time of making this guide. He uses the combat brace. But I'm telling you right now, look at the stats for regen bracelet. You're missing out on a lot, especially that double hit points regeneration. Anyway, ring, you're going to want to bring Berserker Ring Eye, +8 strength bonus. You can't really argue with that. If you can't afford one, go get one and imbue it with Nightmare Zone points. Well worth your time. So let's go over what your inventory is going to look like if you're attacking. First off, do not forget to bring your Guthins. This is for your most important inventory spots will dedicated to Guthins. There's nothing like the feeling of healing a 37 off Guthins. That's 2 sharks right there, and that's like 1 heal. Like 4 Guthins spots will save you an infinite amount of food slots because Guthins heals 1/4 of the time you deal damage for that entire damage that you dealt. So 1/4 of the time, if you hit a 50 and it just decides to heal that 50 you hit with Guthins, you're healing 50 hit points. I mean, granted your max hit won't be 50, it's more around mid-30s, but it feels nice. And sometimes Guthins just absolutely pops off and you'll go from 20 hit points to 99 real quick and save a lot of food in the process. So then, in addition to that, you also need your spec weapon. I recommend bringing Bandos Godsword or Dragon Warhammer if you're attacking. If you don't want to bring these 2 items, alternates are stuff like a Crystal Halberd imbued, pretty good spec weapon, Ceridoma Godsword if you want to get that half hit points regen when you deal damage, as well as 1/4 of your prayer points regeneration whenever you spec. or you can get creative with your spec weapon, try whatever you want, but really Bandos, Godsword, Dragon, Warhammer is the best ones. You're going to want to bring the Amulet of the Damned. So this is like a little spicy tech I add to it. So it allows you to heal the 109 hit points of your max. So that's an additional 10 hit points every single kill that you get that you don't have to eat food or heal for, because you're starting your kill already with 109 hit points, or an extra 10%. So Amulet of the Damned is pretty good, but if you don't want to bring Amulet of the Damned, you could maybe bring an extra super combat or restore spot. But overall, Amulet of the Damned is pretty good for those long trips. You can bring a hammer if you want in your inventory, but I'm going to recommend you hammer trick. So bring one if you want. You're going to need to maybe reduce a super restore slot, but you don't need to bring a hammer. So what you're going to do then is 4 super combat potions. This is standard. Every super combat potion lasts about 10 minutes. So 40 minutes per trip. That lasts you about 3 hours, give or take. The standard length of a Bandos trip is roughly about 3 hours anyway. So 4 super combat potions will last you fine as long as you're pot sharing. In addition to this, you're going to want to bring 2 mana rays. That's 22 hit points of healing as opposed to 20 of a shark. 2 mana rays should be about all you need for the entirety of the trip, because two food spots should be more than enough. Once you eat these mana rays in a panic or something, you pick them up with a tuna potato or a shark that's dropped, or use your bone and peaches tabs. There's plenty of ways to heal. 2 mana rays is the food for you. Now the food for the tank, you're going to bring 4 brews. You have to keep in mind that your role as an attacker is to assist your tank at all costs. So you want to take as least resources as possible from your tank and give as much to your tank as you can. So you're bringing 4 brews, not just for you, but mainly in the idea that you're giving these to your tank. You can survive a Bandos kill on 60 hit points easy, but your tank most likely will not be able to just live on 60 hit points going into a kill fresh. So 4 brews for your tank. You're going to bring 9 super restores in addition to this. You're going to want to use all the super combat potions and all your super restores, all 9 of the super restores. You're going to ideally want to pot share with either you or your tank if you're bringing pot share. If you are not bringing pot share, give these super restores to the one of your team with pot share. Very important that 1 dose of pot share can go to 2 people. You're not going to want to pot share with all 3 people on your team, because if you all 3 gather up, it's going to use 2 doses for 3 people. So mainly, you and 1 other person will share using 1 dose in between both of you, and it counts for the full effects of both. You're going to want to bring 50 bones to peaches tabs. So obviously everything that dies in Bandos God Wars is going to be dropping bones. Bones to peaches is a very easy way to convert those bones into peaches to heal you. I don't know the exact amount. I'll put it on the screen. It's either 6, 7, or 8 hit points, but it can end up adding up over time. You're going to want to bring in inventory 2 Trollheim teleports. Again, you're going to want to use the method I talked about before, where you're going to use 1 Trollheim teleport, then revert it back into a house tab. That way you have a way to return back to your house when the trip is over. And finally, you're going to want to bring a rune pouch. In this rune pouch, you will either bring pot share runes, or you will bring ouch runes. Depending on what your role is, you can communicate that with your team, but sometimes it changes. Mainly pot share or ouch, you want to bring either one. So now it's time to go over the tank inventory and gear setup guide. If you're going as a tanker, your role would definitely be harder than that of an attacker, but I think the role that you will be taking as a tank is a lot more rewarding and more challenging and more fun than that of the attacker. So your gear setup will start off, if you have the money, with full Justicar setup. So for those that do not know how Justicar works, it takes your total range defense bonus, or whatever the bonus that the enemy is currently attacking on, and then divides it by 3,000. So in this case, since you will be having 465 range defense bonus from the inventory setup that I will go over, or gear setup that I will go over, it takes your 465, divide that by 3,000, and in that percentage is the percentage of total damage reduction you'll be taking. So you'll be taking 15.5% less damage from Bandos' range attack when it does hit. And this is the most important thing, because when you're tanking, you will be praying melee. And so that means that you want to tank as much range hit as possible, because Bandos' special attack attacks everyone in the room with a range attack that can hit up to a 35. So effectively, you are now reducing the chance that that range attack hits by a huge amount. So most likely will not hit you in full Justicar, but in the event that it does hit you, it will only hit you for 15.5% less than it normally would. So that 35 is scaled down to basically a 30 to high 20s, which helps you a lot over the long time with Bandos. But now once you have that Justicar full setup, you can bring the Fury. really self-explanatory, has great attack bonuses, and it still gives you that defense. Guardian Boots here are a must. Guardian Boots allows you to have a huge defense bonus, and it gives you strength, and it counts as a Bandos item. So that's 3 of the things you're really looking for in items. Guardian Boots are a must here, regardless of what setup you're bringing. You're going to want to also bring the Inferno Cape or Fire Cape in case you're a noob and you don't have an Inferno Cape yet. Of course, you want the Unholy Blessing as your quiver ammo slot. You're not going to be bringing any arrows, and the Unholy Blessing counts as a Zamrock item, so that's a win-win. You're going to want to bring the Grazi Rapier if you could afford it as an attack weapon, best in slot. If you can't afford that, you're going to want to go with the Tentacle Whip. Alternate to Tentacle Whip is a Hasta. It does have significantly less attack and strength bonuses, but the Hasta does allow you to have extra range defense bonus, which will help you in the long run. But overall, I suggest bringing the Grazi Rapier or the Tentacle Whip in case you cannot afford it. For your shield, you're going to bring the Elysian Spirit Shield. Again, that's 600 mil. Unfortunately, I don't have that type of funds, so instead of bringing the Elysian Spirit Shield, I bring the Dragonfire Shield, which has a huge defense bonus for range. But if you can't afford the Ellie, it's an amazing damage reduction tool. It reduces 75% of the time or something like that. It reduces, I think, 15% damage taken, so that's like an additional 11% or 10% over time. If you can't bring the Ellie, great option to do so. So for your gloves, you're going to bring Bandos gloves. Very self-explanatory. If you're tanking, you really need them. And for your ring, you're going to bring Ring of Suffering. This is amazing defense bonus, and it actually gives you +4 prayer when it's imbued with Nightmare Zone points as well. So Ring of Suffering is amazing for tanking. So the inventory setup for the tank is the exact same as the inventory setup for the attack. The only difference that would make is if you're less experienced, you should bring more brews and less restores or super combat potions. Since I'm very experienced at Bandos, I barely take any damage when I'm tanking in a duo or trio, so I really don't need to bring much food or brews. But for example, usually I bring 2 Manta Rays and 4 brews, 9 super restores. Maybe you could reduce a number 1 restore and 1 super combat potion in exchange for 1 extra Manta Ray and 1 brew, but your inventory setup is largely dependent on what you think you need to bring, so you could experiment with what you choose to bring the first time and then adjust on your second and third trips. One thing to keep in mind here, as well as the attack setup, you're going to want to coordinate who is ouching and who is pot sharing, because your rune pouch will be dependent of the runes of that spell. So the last thing you have to do when you enter the Bandos room is perform a final check of your setup. If you're attacking, you want to be praying range and flicking piety when you are about to do damage calculation to the boss. Always keep pray range on at all time during the boss battle until the boss dies. Then you will be praying mage, but we will go over that in the future. If you are tanking, it is very important that you are always praying protect from melee. Bandos can hit up to 60 with his melee attack. You do not want to take that to the face, so you're going to be praying melee and flicking piety if you can, but personally I just keep pray melee and piety on at all times, and my prayer bonus and my 99 prayer are enough to sustain my prayer throughout the entire fight every time. If you're lower prayer, you might want to consider different prayers or maybe even flicking, but I suggest praying melee and just holding piety the entirety of the fight. In addition to this, you want to make sure that your left click always on NPCs where available is always on. That way that you're not having to right click Bandos every single time you want to attack him. If you're a tank, you want to always left click the boss, and if you're walking under the tank, you want to be using right click. That way that the attack boss is just an easy one click option. So now you guys finally think that you're ready for the Bandos boss fight. Once you enter the room, I will first go over the attacking role and their duty when it comes to killing the Bandos boss. So first of all, the most important part about the attacker role is you never attack the boss first. You always let the tank attack the boss first, because that is the person who will be getting the aggro throughout the remainder of the fight. It's very important to be conscious that if the tanker ever steps under the boss for too long, about 3 or 4 attack cycles, the boss will then aggro the newest person to attack him and will no longer be on the tank. Just something to keep out for. It's actually kind of hard to stay under the Bandos boss that long, but if your tank does take too much damage very quickly, it is possible, and it's something that you need to look out for. If for some reason you ever do end up taking the boss aggro as the attacker, don't panic, just switch your prayer to pray melee, and you could either continue attacking the boss while running underneath, kind of following the tank guide, which I will explain in the future, or you could try to stand under the boss for long enough that his aggro switches to someone else. but that's a little bit of a roulette, and someone might get hit in the face by the bullet. So let's just play it safe. Just don't attack the boss first. Just don't do it. Like, if this guy died, that guy died, everyone dies if you attack the boss first. It's actually kind of hilarious if you don't know it's coming. But it's really not funny for the person that is tanking because his attacker just died for no stupid reason. So now that we got that through, once you will kill the boss, you will, during the time that you will be killing the boss, you'll be keeping your prey range on and flicking piety whenever you are about to attack in order to conserve prayer. You don't have it on continuously. It's pretty easy to flick if you're the attacker role. Then finally the boss will be defeated. You switch your prayer to pray mage only if you are the one taking aggro of all 3 minions. The way that the Bandos minions work is that all 3 minions attack the most recent person and deal the last hit on Bandos. So the person who does the last hit will most likely have aggro of all 3. You switch your gear to all the Guthan's gear for healing, and you switch your prayer to pray mage. You first attack the mage minion, which will be on the corner of the room, and he's the most dangerous, so all 3 players attack him at once, remove that threat. Then the person who is taking the aggro will switch to his prayer to pray range, and you will attack the melee minion. The melee minion doesn't really do much, so all 3 of you will attack him to remove that threat as well. And then by now, all 3 people should be relatively healed, but preference goes to the tank to kill the range minion, which is the final minion, in order to regain health. But if in the event that the tank is about full health and the attacker is extremely low, the attacker or the person with the lowest hit points could have preference to attack that final range minion while the person taking the aggro is praying range. The deciding factor of when to heal if you're an attacker is around 30 hit points. Since you're praying range, you will never take range damage during the boss fight, but you still can be comboed by both the mage and the melee minion at the same time. I say around 30 to 35 hit points is the safe amount of hit points to have, because that ensures that if you do get hit by both at the same time that you won't just immediately die. However rare that is, it still possibly could happen, but around 35 hit points during the boss fight is fine, and still around 35 hit points once the boss is killed if you are taking all 3 minions aggro. 35 hit points should be fine, but you have to keep conscious that if you are attacking the minions and they are attacking you, that they can kill you if you're 10 HP, so you need to use that resource and eat rather than risk dying too early and then having a re-kill count, come get your stuff. It ends up being a huge pain in the ass for everyone, and it's not fun. Once you've killed everyone in the room, it's very important to know that the Bandos altar in the room does in fact restore your full prayer every 10 minutes. Believe it or not, Cardella64, my noob friend, unfortunately didn't know the altars restored your prayer points, but I told him. Anyway, the special attribute about this altar is that for every Bandos item that you're wearing, it gives you 1 extra prayer point above your base hit prayer point level. So if I'm level 98 prayer and I'm wearing 2 Bandos items, a God Sword and Tasets, I restore my prayer back to 100 prayer points base, which is really, really nice. But it's most important to know that every 10 minutes you want to be using that altar as much as possible. And when your timer is approaching that 10-minute window, like you have 2 minutes left, you probably have about 1 Bandos kill before you can use that prayer altar. And it's important that if you have 2 minutes left and you see you have about 40 prayer, which is what I would recommend starting every kill with, about 40 prayer, you don't need to use a super restore to recharge your prayer because you're going to be using that altar next kill anyway. So let your prayer get really close to 1 hit points before you use that altar to get maximum value out of that prayer recharge. It'll be very important in the long run to do this. In addition to this, it's mostly priority to the attackers to be in charge of whatever drops are dropping to ouch them or to re-drop them on the floor, while the tank is making sure that his account has good hit points and he's controlling basically all the shots and team coordination. It's the attacker's job to basically coordinate what loot they're re-dropping, and Bandos does drop a lot of sharks, tuna potatoes, and super restores, which attackers are all going to be responsible of re-dropping on the floor. The way that re-dropping works is you drop a bunch of items that you can no longer hold in your inventory on the floor. These items will stay there definitely throughout the entirety of the Bandos kill, but if for some reason you're really dragging through the Bandos kill, really dragging through the minions, you might want to send 1 person early to get this drop and re-drop it. But if not, you'll be fine to kill all 3 minions and the boss. Still have about 20 to 30 seconds left on the 1.5 minute boss timer before the boss spawns again in order to pick up all these items and re-drop them. The way that I do this is if I see a stack of 5 items dropped on the floor, I'll go to a spot adjacent but not on to that spot. I'll drop 5 random items in my inventory that I no longer need, and I'll pick up those 5 items that were previously dropped on the floor, and that's it. And then next kill, when I eventually go back to redrop again, I'll drop those 5 items that I originally picked up and pick the 5 that I dropped previously. And it's just a cycle of dropping 5 on the floor, picking up 5 every boss kill. That way to ensure that even though you have 28 inventory spots, you can really hold even like 40 or 50 because you're dropping so many on the floor and they're not disappearing. Also, anyone on your team could help you with this, but there's about like a 1-minute window in between when your teammate drops it and you're actually able to see it. Okay, so now it's time for my brothers. The people who got balls to go into the Bandos room. Those that are willing to take one for the team. Those that are... Anyway, this is the tank part of the guide. I get really excited when it comes to tanking because it's something that I really like doing. It's my favorite part about this game, but it's the most challenging part of the Bandos room and the most rewarding. Starting off with the perks of tanking, most trips and clans will agree to give Bandos boots to the tank. Whoop-de-doo, that's 200k for you, big deal. It used to be back when Bandos Scout Swords were cheaper that the tank would get the hilt when it was like 2 mil, but now that it's 10 mil, good luck convincing your team with that. But Bandos tanks generally do get a little bit more loot because it's harder and usually costs a little bit more in resources. But without further ado, let's get on with that tank guide. So to start off, you're going to want to be setting your quick prayers to pray melee and piety. Just keep both of them on throughout the entirety of the kill. You should be fine to last the entirety of the kill if you're around 40 prayer points. If you know that you're not going to take end aggro and that you're going to do a quick kill, maybe 25 would be okay, but I definitely would not recommend being lower than 25 just for safety. You want to be checking your hit points and prayer points throughout the duration of the kill, making sure your prayer points definitely don't drop down below 5, and your hit points need to at minimum be 40. Bandos can hit a 35 with his range, like that, bam, 35. And if you're ever going to get attacked with the minion after that, all 3 are going to attack you at once. So 2 could possibly hit you because you're praying range. So if either the mage or the melee minion somehow happens to hit you like a 5 or a 6, if you only are at 40 hit points or 35 hit points, you could just immediately die, get smited by Bandos. So I recommend staying at least 45 hit points because you can be comboed very quick. If you really want to do like a pro tactic, it's a little bit risky for new players. But what we can do is you can sit lower than 35 hit points, but you need to be looking what attack Bandos does. So if all of a sudden Bandos just kind of is sitting there, his animation is a little bit delayed if you attack and flinch him, but it kind of looks like an airwave coming to you in slow motion. I guess I'll zoom in here and show you what it looks like. But if you ever see this coming towards you, you have about 2 to 3 ticks to eat something. It's kind of like tick eating, where if you see that he's getting that special hit and you're at less than 35 hit points, you can very quickly either shark brew or just shark and get above that 35 to about that 45 threshold. That way, if for some reason that Bandos special attack, which it's not likely to hit if you have extremely tanky gear, but it can hit up to 35. If it does so happen to hit and you're 25 hit points, you hit that shark, you get all the way up to 45, you're good. You're pretty much good, but you just got to be very wary of that hit points threshold, and it only comes really from experience, knowing when to eat, when not to eat. You're trying to conserve as much resources as possible while still surviving. So now moving on to the mechanics of the boss. So when you're attacking the boss, you could attack 2 times with a whip to Bandos' 1 time with the Bandos attack. But there's only a very short amount of time you have in between your second attack to when you have to run under the boss. So you want to keep the ratio of your attacks to Bandos' attacks to 2 to 1. So you want to attack Bandos with your attack, it flinches him, then he'll attack, then you have enough time for you to attack and then quick under the boss to run underneath him before Bandos attacks again. If you don't do this, Bandos will be attacking you on average more times per kill, which is not good because you want to minimize the amount of ranged special attacks he can damage you with. But if you're doing this, you get in a groove. You can do 2 attacks per cycle of Bandos and kind of continue that. You'll notice that it's kind of hard to step under Bandos because he's only like a 2x2 square. He's not that big of a boss, and he moves around you pretty quick. So you're only going to be stepping under him for a fraction of the second. And he'll be most likely pop out from underneath you without you wanting to move and attack him. And if this does happen where Bandos attacks you before you attack him, you only have enough time to attack him once before you have to run under. And I recommend walking at him, gaining your cool, and then attacking him for once. It flinches him. you'll attack 2 times again. Once you get kind of more familiar with this technique, you can whip him once. Bandos will attack you. Switch to a special weapon such as the Bandos Godsword, Ceridoma Godsword, Crystal Halberd imbued, or a slower attack weapon to hit that second attack with. That way when you step under him, it'll reset your attack timer that you'll be able to hit him with a whip on the first attack again. I hope you understand this, but it's basically a cycle of you can attack him 2 times, and if you're going to attack him with a special weapon that has a slower regeneration on attack cycles, you can put that more powerful, slower weapon, such as a Godsword, on your second attack. That way you're still able to get 2 in. So that is all, my fellow nerds. I wish you all the best of luck. Attacking is very easy. The tanking is very difficult. So I wish you all the best in getting your Bandos tasets, Bandos Godswords, and Bandos chestplates. And I wish you all a Merry Christmas. Good night. Oh my god, we got it! Jig, jig, jig!